now we're going to have from staff an overview of the state mandated organic waste recycling requirements and the possible new Newport Beach Municipal Code changes that are coming our way. Mr. Webb and team.
Thank you. The team's here. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Wanted to take some time today on our study session to talk about some changes we've been having in legislation from the state and how we handle and address our waste streams. So tonight we have Michael Martin here tonight, our Deputy Director, and also Trevor Blythe, who's our consultant with economics that helps us in the refuge category. They're going to give you a presentation and go over some of the changes you can expect and how we're looking to address it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and staff. I'd like to just give you the quick presentation here. As Dave mentioned, I'll be taking us through the presentation. I've got Trevor here as our subject matter expert, so if we have some questions that have some technical caliber to them, I'll be referring to him for support as well. So just to go into a quick overview of what we'll be covering in this presentation, we're going to go over the CalRecycle and what their mandates are and what's brought about some of the needs for some of these changes, the compliance requirements for these changes, that these have brought about a revised ordinance and a franchise amendment. So we're going to talk a little bit about the revisions to those. And then we're going to touch just briefly on future legislation and just a quick preview of some of the other stuff that'll be coming down the line in future years. So just quickly, who is CalRecycle? They're the California's Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery. They're the administrators and they provide oversight for all the California state-managed non-hazardous waste handling and recycling programs. So this group monitors and works with local jurisdictions for compliance with solid waste legislation, and local jurisdictions are referred to the Jurisdictional Compliance Unit for non-compliance. So these are the ones who set the rules, set the standards for all the legislature, and we report to them on a regular basis on how we're doing with meeting those mandates. So this is the organization who helps with that. So this is just a quick snapshot of the different legislation that is currently in place or about to become in place. So AB 939 is already passed. That's something we've been working on. AB 341 is currently the state goal that we've been working towards as well, and that's diversion of all recycling material. AB 1826 is the one. This is the one that's really prompted a lot of our changes in our municipal code and our franchise amendments. So this is more along the lines of organics recycling, and then there's some future legislation there with regards to alternative daily cover, and eventually increased requirements for organics disposal and food waste. So.
Let me just interject, just so for the folks listening at home, just understand, this is what we're going to be talking about. What's happening as mandated by the state is everybody's been recycling for years, and now it's going into organic recycling, which is something that we haven't been doing. So this is about food and waste, and everything that is produced inside the home or business ultimately will be mandated to be recycled. So it's a time frame here that we're going against here over the next several years.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That is correct. And just to clarify a little bit about organics and what organics is. Organics recycling is considered food waste, or what's considered the wet material that goes into the waste stream. The goal and objective of this is to clean up the waste stream so there's more recoverable material, and take that organic material and divert it to another source as a recycling material that could be used for compost or other things like that. And we could talk more about that later, but that just kind of gives a little bit more definition or insight into what organics recycling consists of. Okay, so just a quick overview of some of the proposed revisions we're going to make to the ordinance here to bring us into compliance with these mandates. In January, we started a city council working group that consists of some of our council members and other members of staff to discuss how we're going to make these changes. We've developed a draft ordinance that will require businesses to recycle and comply with CalRecycle's requirements. Now, this ordinance revision will also require conforming amendments to the city's non-exclusive commercial franchise agreements. So that's how our franchise comes into play and is also in need of some revisions as well. So we would developed a draft franchise amendment to go into addition to that. And then these items will be reviewed by the working group and brought to council in September for first reading. So just a little further on the proposed ordinance revisions, we've developed this draft ordinance that will meet the requirements of AB 341 and 1826. So you remember on that timeline there, those are the two that are due either this year or next. So we've got to make these changes to this ordinance to help us meet the compliance efforts of that. So effective January 1st, 2020, if approved by council, the ordinance will require all businesses and multifamily properties covered by AB 341 and 1826 to recycle. The ordinance establishes requirements for businesses required by statute to ensure quality programs and city compliance. So this is to ensure that a program is implemented and is followed and that it meets their compliance requirements for the city and CalRecycle. Some other changes to the proposed ordinance revision here is...
Excuse me,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, you want to ask a question?
So, since this is going to come back, it probably makes sense to just have a couple of quick background items as well for our fellow council members. So the working group that he's referencing is the mayor, Councilmember Brenner, and me. And so a lot of this came about because CalRecycle sent a letter back on March 21st, 2017, outlining what they considered to be deficiencies with the city's compliance with some of the state codes. And so at the time, the city's response was, in specific, by the way, to commercial haulers, not to residential. The city had promised three things: get information from the haulers. So, how many haulers commercial haulers do we have on the franchise side, both the top tier and the lower tier?
So tier 1 haulers, we have 5.
Yep.
And then including tier 2, we've got
38, I think.
38.
Okay, so part of the requirement was to get information from the haulers on on their compliance, send letters to non-participating businesses. So the businesses within our city that they didn't have an organics recycling program, and then require businesses to get a program in place via ordinance. And part of the problem that we found out from our haulers was there were a lot of businesses not complying because there was nothing requiring them to do so. And so we didn't have any ordinance. We currently don't have an ordinance in place that requires our commercial businesses to have an organic waste diversion program. And so the problem was that by refusing, they were actually putting the haulers themselves into non-compliance with the franchise agreements. And we need part of the process now is we need to get an ordinance in place, and then we also need to have a franchise agreement that has more teeth in it, and which is what we're covering right now. So wanted to make sure we had provided proper background, a little bit more background. This is great background, a little bit more background because I'm realizing as we're going through this that it's important for in the context that CalRecycle would consider us to be out of compliance if we don't follow through on this, and out of compliance is a very costly problem to have. So that's the issue as we're moving down this, is that it's not just the laws, it's the regulatory bodies that are coming and paying attention on this one. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that I talked about that as well.
That's very good, and thank you. Would you, as long as we're on this slide, could you just clarify all businesses and multifamily, what that coverage means?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. 341, AB 341 would require any business that generates 4 or more cubic yards of waste per week to make arrangements to recycle. So that's like your average trash dumpster. If it gets picked up more than 2 times per week, that business would be required to make arrangements to recycle. Multifamily units with 5 or more housing units would also be on the hook for this law. And for AB 1826, which requires commercial businesses to recycle their food waste, the law currently requires businesses that generate 4 or more yards of trash per week, similar to what AB 341 requires. So we'll in future slides, we'll provide an update on how many businesses will actually be impacted by this that aren't in compliance now that will need to be. But it's around 175 or so currently that are out of compliance.
Sorry, one last.
Sure, go ahead.
Piggybacking on that, could you talk a little bit about outreach you know, talking to the chambers of commerce, talking to the business improvement districts, talking to all this stuff. I know you all have done a lot to try to get, especially our restaurants, involved in the process. So would you mind just talking about that so no one is accusing us of blindsiding them with any of this information?
Yeah, so city staff, in conjunction with economics here, our consultant, has been working directly with businesses who have been found to be non-compliant, and just kind of, you know, bringing them up to speed on what the requirements are, you know, the obligation they have to work with the hauler to be in compliance. Some of the struggles or challenges we run into is that we don't have a lot to be able to enforce upon them to bring them into compliance. Right now, we're just asking, the way our municipal code is written right now is we could ask them to be in compliance, but there's nothing we have that can make them be in compliance. So if they choose to not want to comply and they don't want to work with their hauler, then, you know, it puts us in an odd situation, and it makes things difficult for us. But we are reaching out to work with those who can and are willing to. And we've actually just put out a contract to work with a PR firm to do all the public outreach and to take it further with all the bids and all the other organizations throughout the city who we could really get ahead of this and get the word out to.
All right, please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so on the next slide here, so with this ordinance revision, just like we were talking about, the city may enforce against businesses for noncompliance. Businesses may use self-haul or internal recycling programs to comply. So that is an option that they have that they could opt to, provided that those still remain in compliance. And then it would require waivers for low organics generation levels and space constraints. So those are some things that are taken in consideration as a potential challenge to meet the compliance. So that waiver option is there, but it is always investigated and verified by city staff and CalRecycle to make sure it complies. And then lastly here on the proposed ordinance revision, so again, compliance impacts. So AB 341, which is the mandatory recycling, our current compliance rate is roughly around 90%. Approximately 25 businesses and multifamily complexes in the city do not have recycling programs in place. So this is standard recycling program. This isn't organics. This is your standard, you know, bottles and cans, plastic, cardboard, that type of recycling under 341. We still have 25 businesses that are unable to be in compliance with that. So this municipal code change will help us be able to wrap that up and get us into the compliance rate that we know we could accomplish and get those 25 businesses where they need to be. So AB 1826, which is the mandatory organics recycling, current compliance rate is around 40%. And we have approximately 150 food service establishments that do not have food scrap recycling programs in place to date.
Is this where the state was critical of us?
Yes,
both these areas?
the state was critical with us primarily on the 341 requirement, because that's been in place for a while now. And then they are starting to become critical with us on 1826, because that's currently something that's being looked at now as well. So,
Oh, Mr. Avery.
So what are the barriers for these businesses to compliance?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What are the barriers of the businesses to compliance? Is it an onerous bar to cross to get into compliance for them, or is it just there's not enough public awareness for them to pick it up, or
It's
all over the map, huh?
It's kind of all over the map. It's a combination of things. Some of them it's challenging to add this new process into their workflow of what they do.
Right.
Some of them are restaurants that, you know, have to make place for this new system and change the way they operate essentially. And some of it's space issues. Some of them don't have the room for it or just don't want to deal with it. A lot of it is awareness. They're not even aware that this is a requirement. So we're really working hard to kind of help close those gaps and work with them on those issues.
So for a small restaurant, what's involved with changing over? Is it just extra cans and separation is primarily what we're talking about?
Yeah, ideally you would want to separate the material at the source where it's being generated.
In the
So-
kitchen?
Yeah, so in the kitchen, in the food prep area, or they're bussing the tables, that material could go directly into a bin that could then be taken out to be picked up for collection. That's the ideal situation. Now, some of the restaurants would have challenges with that, perhaps. location on where they could put that within their establishment, and training their staff on how to utilize that system and keeping it clean of other contaminants. So there are some challenges there, and we recognize that. So we're working hard to, on our public outreach, to help educate them on options and different ways to execute a compliant program.
And then do we monitor them for clean organics? And so in other words, might be some that aren't, they're just adding a lot of contaminants to it, and it's sort of a 50-50 mix because people aren't trained up or paying attention. Is that our responsibility to monitor it?
It's the hauler's responsibility to
Okay.
monitor that, and it's their responsibility to report that back. So with the ordinance change, it'll be a little bit more complacent upon the haulers to help implement that program and monitor the program of its success. And if they reach challenges and they've exhausted all their resources as outlined, then we would get involved and help assist in bringing that business into compliance or other resources that we could potentially have available to work with them.
So have we done that? Have we issued citations to businesses prior?
Not as of yet. Our municipal code doesn't allow us to, so we need to make this change in
So
order
we
to
need a
do
little,
that.
right.
Yeah.
We need to be able to enforce that a little
Correct.
more strongly. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have to follow up on that, do we have to set up a whole enforcement mechanism? Are we going to rely on the franchise holder to be the key enforcer?
There is going to be some dependence upon city staff to follow through on some of the enforcement that's going to come out of this. And as this program continues to grow all the way throughout, even to the residential level, it's going to become burdensome for us to monitor that. Again, we're writing this program so that a lot of the burden is on the hauler, and it is complacent upon them to do so, but there will be points where they've exhausted all their resources, and we would have to, get involved. And that would require staff time or the time of our consultant to follow through on those issues.
Well, and certainly it's going to separate the haulers, those who maybe are large hauler organizations who certainly are familiar and follow state regulations, and those who are smaller occasional haulers who perhaps are not so cognizant of what state mandates are. So it's going to really determine, they'll sort themselves out, I guess.
Yeah, we imagine through attrition, that there's going to be some changes of the different haulers that can provide the service and meet the compliance. But that's, yet to be determined. And we're just hoping by the change of this municipal code and the franchise amendment, that'll help us to really attract and maintain the business establishments that we want to work with, that we know could keep us in compliance.
Okay, all right. Please proceed.
So last steps on our proposed ordinance revision. We're going to go back to the working group with our final revision and hopefully have that prepared for the first reading in September. And then we've retained, like what we mentioned earlier, we've retained a PR firm for public outreach efforts and should notify businesses impacted by this ordinance. So our goal is to give a heads up to everyone that this is coming, that it won't be a surprise, and they'll know what to expect coming forward. So.
What is your anecdotal, informal, non-scientific opinion about how informed the customer base is, the business and multifamily owners?
Yeah, I'm going to refer to Trevor on this one. He's been working on that.
We send a letter per state law. The city sends a letter to every non-compliant generator, and all the haulers are required to notify the businesses that they have that are not in compliance. So they get at least 2 touch points each year between the city and the hauler. And believe it or not, people are still caught off guard or surprised by this, just because the nature of restaurants, there's a lot of turnover.
And there's really no consequence, right?
Yeah, the state did
They
not
get a letter
include-
and nobody follows up?
Precisely, yeah. So the state doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms built into the AB 1826 or 341. It's incumbent on the city to move those forward. So this would take this to the next level.
Most people, I guess the question then, most businesses are not fully aware.
Some have taken it by the horns, so to speak, and they've embedded it into their corporate culture to be, a steward of the environment and be sustainable. And those tend to be some of the larger corporate chains. The mom and pops are more than willing to work with the city to do whatever it takes to operate in the city. And then there's some folks that honestly just don't know. And there's another smaller category of folks that just don't want to do it because they don't want to train their staff. They basically are waiting for fines to actually implement the programs.
So we're really directing it to the franchise haulers as well as to the business operators.
Yes.
Okay. All right, please proceed.
Okay, next segment here, we're going to talk about the proposed franchise amendment. So like we talked about before, the change to municipal code also gives us the opportunity to amend our franchise agreement. So just to cover some of the changes that are incumbent upon that. So current hauler compliance implementation requirements are vague. So the franchise agreement isn't really clear as to how the hauler is to implement the program and to work with the establishment. It just says that they are to provide a program. So there is a lot to be desired on that. So we're working on cleaning that up. The franchise lacks an out clause for accounts that refuse to implement a recycling program. So like we mentioned earlier, there are some of those accounts that exist, and we need a way to be able to work through those. Haulers do not have the authority to require businesses to implement state-mandated recycling programs. As it currently stands, it's between the hauler and the establishment to be able to work this program out. And the city is aware of their efforts, but there's not a lot that could be done to really toe the line to follow through on the program. So this change will help with that as well. Next component here would be it revises the franchise to enhance hauler requirements for program implementation. We talked about it earlier. It allows for referral of recalcitrant accounts to the city for compliance actions. So now once the hauler's done all their due diligence, they've done everything that they can to work with the establishment to bring them into compliance, and their efforts still aren't yielding the desired results, then they could then be referred to the city, and we would be able to get involved and work with them and have other resources made available, or if so be it, come to enforcement action. So, and then finally, it requires best practices to be implemented and recorded by the hauler before referral to the city for ordinance enforcement. So again, this requires the hauler to do their due diligence. They've really got to make sure the efforts put forward, and we'll have ways of being able to establish that. So, and then the other issue that we wanted to clean up on the franchise amendment was the collision avoidance. So per Section 18C, all haulers are required to have collision avoidance systems in place, and the franchise amendment reinforces the requirement and requires annual reporting of collision avoidance systems. So right now, our franchise agreement just requires them to have one, and that's all. It doesn't really go into much detail on that. So we just wanted to clean that up and have it a little bit more clear as to what our expectations are to meet that requirement, and how we will be able to verify that the requirement is being met and that it's achieving the desired results. So, and then just a couple other small items we're going to cover under this amendment too. It's going to tie construction, demolition, waste recycling requirements to state law, and that's the Cal Green program. And then it's also going to allow us to increase our insurance amounts. Since this program is growing so largely, it's going to have a need for that, so we're going to be able to do that as well. And then so just a status update on this revision. It's running along the same lines as the ordinance change, and the city's attorney's office has completed their review of the amendment. It's ready for the working group review, and then we're on track to be brought before the city council for review and approval in September. So the municipal code and the franchise amendment will be coming concurrently before you to be able to review and approve, so that we're on the same timeline. And then just to touch on some pending legislation that's going to be coming down the line to be dealing with as we move forward. AB 1594 is alternative daily cover. This was passed in September of 2014. So this eliminates diversion credit for green waste used as alternative daily cover. And just to elaborate a little bit about alternative daily cover and what that is on a landfill, when they as they fill the landfill and move forward with bringing the waste in daily, they have to cover that material so the trash doesn't blow away, the birds can't get to it, all the other stuff. So green waste is allowed to be used as that alternative daily cover as opposed to just dirt or whatever else. But moving forward, January 2020, that will no longer be considered diversion. So although we currently or previously could send that material as alternative daily cover and get credit as diversion, that will change now. So in 2020, we will no longer have that option. This law will reduce the city's landfill diversion rate by 5% per year if no alternative processing options are identified. City Council Working Group currently assessing these options. So there's different options available on how this material could be processed. And the options that are currently available are limited, And more is to be coming on that, and we're kind of at the mercy of what the county offers, what other programs are made available to us in the county. So we're continue to monitor that, continue to explore options, and hopefully avoid having to lose that 5% credit. So.
Mayor Pro Tem.
There's one other component to this as well. The county's going to start charging, right? So it's going to be a lot more expensive as well. What's the anticipated additional cost?
Traditionally, historically, the city sends about 13,000 tons of green waste to the landfill as ADC.
Per year?
Per year, excuse me. And let me just run some calculations. The county has indicated that it'll charge full boat $35 roughly per ton for green waste that's used as ADC after January 1, 2020. So if you take your average times 35, about $469,000 per year additional processing cost for those materials.
And, and the question a lot of cities are having is who pays for that, whether it's the hauler themselves or it gets passed through. And I'm not going to I won't pass judgment on the answer yet, but I understand there is some concern and angst between cities and haulers on that issue. So we're talking an additional $439,000, which is important for our city because by charter we pay for residential. The city pays for the residential trash. So when we're talking about this, it's a lot of money.
It's a cost. Ms. Brenner.
Why is the state eliminating green waste as an alternative daily cover? Is it they feel it's more environmentally friendly?
Short answer, yes. Go ahead.
And what will they use to cover up the trash that this now keeps birds and...
Different landfill operators are going to look to different solutions. You can use reusable tarps and those types of equipment. Some folks use dirt and construction debris. But Orange County is a bit of an anomaly in that we heavily rely on ADC to meet our state diversion requirements. A lot of other parts of the state have figured out alternatives to alternative daily cover. And the other component is the state is trying to reduce methane emissions to comply with its internal greenhouse gas reduction goals. When green waste goes to the landfill as ADC, it creates methane gas, which exacerbates climate change. So the state's trying to crack down on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So what cities will be required to do is eliminate, ultimately, in the next, this is 6 years, all waste that's produced by businesses, multifamily units, and residential homes, all organic waste, to find a repository for it. And so current waste haulers in the business are preparing for this, that they will have the capability to process organic waste. And whether it's hauled somewhere in the county or outside the county, it has to be hauled somewhere to be repurposed. So nothing goes into landfills anymore. Is that essentially where we're headed?
Yes, that's exactly the case. The state is looking to make landfills no longer an option, or less desirable option, or costly to use. The goal is to recover all material and repurpose it in some manner. So whether we recycle the material or reuse it as compost, or use it in a digester system and put gas back into the natural resources, whatever the case may be, they're driving everyone to look at other alternatives to deal with our waste, as opposed to just putting it into the landfill.
And in our case, it will mean transporting this waste somewhere. And there's certainly all the processing, enforcement, and transportation of this waste, whether it's locally or into another county, is going to cost big dollars for the city of Newport Beach. And all cities, but that's going to be a new cost we're going to be facing. Mr. Avery.
I'm just curious. So how many residential trash pickup areas do we have in the city? So 35,000, 40 homes?
22,549.
Oh, way off. What approximately would be the cost? Just a ballpark. Taking
About $1.75 per household per month of additional cost.
Thank you.
What was the amount you said?
$1.75 per household per month if the city passed the cost of processing ADC directly to the ratepayers.
Okay, any
Well,
other,
hang on, to be fair though, the ratepayers are us.
Yeah, right, to the general
so-
fund, I guess.
Right, okay, just wanted to make sure it's important. Okay, thanks.
any other questions up here on the dais? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Any questions by the public on this item?
Was that the entirety of the
Was that the-
presentation?
Oh, we have one more slide
Oh,
here
I
really quick.
apologize.
Sorry. No, it's okay, no problem. It's the
I
last
wanted to
slide
make
here,
sure
so.
I wanted to talk about this one.
So
Okay.
just
Oh,
to
yeah, I
talk-
was already thinking, I read that, so I thought, I was thinking it was already done. My
Quite all right.
apologies.
So AB 1383, this is organic disposal reduction. So this was passed in September of 2016. This sets organic waste reduction goal of 50% by 2020 and 75% by 2025 based on 2014 levels. So this will require all businesses, residential households, and multifamily properties to recycle organic waste on or before January 1st of 2022. So the working group is currently assessing our options on that. So like we talked about earlier, there's going to be a lot of different options hopefully available by that point, but currently right now there's not. So we're just continuing to monitor that, continue to work with other resources and try to find ways of making the waste stream efficient on where we could take this material. And our goal isn't to create multiple waste streams. Our goal is to try to manage the existing waste streams we have, because the more waste streams you have, the more cans you have, and the more cans in front of a property that you have to deal with. So as we're all aware, space constraints are an issue. So we're mindful of that, and we're working hard to find the best solution.
Mr. Avery?
Has any municipality ever charged by the can? In other words, you know, some households are more efficient in the way they deal with, you know, their paper products and cardboard and all the rest of it, and go to recycling centers and get rid of it.
Yeah, some cities have variable cart rates. So if you have a 35-gallon trash cart, you pay less than your neighbor who has a 90-gallon trash cart.
Right.
So there's volume-based discounts in some cases. Some cities are experimenting with pay-as-you-throw, where there's an onboard scale on the trash container, and you pay by the pound, essentially,
Right.
for disposal.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
All right, so this one seems like it's a ways off, but it's not. And this is, I will say real quick, the subcommittee that's working on the working group that's working on this, we don't know the answer to this one. And it's pretty hard, and so we've got to bring this and talk it out a little bit, because here are a couple things. So one of them is, in order to get to this, there's no question we've got to get to a green can at some point, the green top. Right now, that's not a given option for most of the city. It is up in Newport Coast, isn't it? We've got two different contracts with CR&R. Well, actually, no, it's not.
I think in HOA, there's a landscape contract, and they pick it up.
Okay, so then what we're looking at is, we've got to get to a green can. And in order to get to a green can, the question really is going to be, do we want to add a green can in addition to the blue top, which is the recycling, and the black top, which is the trash, or do we want to combine down the blue and the black into one? And we're going to talk about that in a second. And also have the green. And the reason to do that is because if you add a green on top of the black and the blue, then you have more trash trucks on the street. I don't think anyone wants that. And so the question is really going to be, first off, if that's where we have to get to, and my understanding is we have to get there based on the requirements of this, we've got to get to a green. Is that fair to say?
By 2022? 3 years.
We're hoping our best possible scenario is to have a two-can system, a wet system and a dry system.
Yeah, I guess, so let me rephrase that question. So under any situation, we have to get to having a green can, which is the wet, correct? Okay, so
Yes, to make our goal, that would be correct.
okay, so if that's what we have to get to, then the question then is, what do we do? Do we do a 2-can system, or do we do a 3-can system? And one of the things that's important for a lot of folks to understand, and we've talked about this, and actually we have this conversation in my house often, is the black and the blue, they both get separated out at the same facility. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of folks are really good at recycling, and a lot of folks aren't very good at recycling, and they don't quite know what goes into what. And the MRF, what's the MRF stand for? I forget.
Material Recovery Facility.
Okay, so the MRF actually has these unbelievable technological systems that separate out trash and into recycling. It's incredible. And so if they both are going to the same place and they're both getting that through, there are a couple things. One, we're going to have to convince people that if we go to a black and a blue and combine it into just one can, that it's still recycling. So that's number one. I think we've got to be able to assure people of that. And then we also need to figure out a way of making sure that we've got the green can, the dry and the wet, basically. But it's going to take a lot of time for folks to work through that, because I'm going to go out on a limb and guess a lot of people have one or two people in their households who are very, very adamant about separating everything, and we've got to make sure that those folks don't feel cheated by the process. So that's number one. But the other, part of the other problem here, and that is one problem. We've got to work that one through. Another problem is this: in order to get here, we can't send organic waste to landfills anymore. So that green can, and this is going to come up also on the franchise agreements. Where do we send that? There are not a lot of facilities that will allow for this, and that's one of the things we're trying to work through as well. So just real quick, we actually invited a county representative into the last meeting that we had, and I will tell you, I'm not convinced the county is going to reach their goal. Like, they're trying to create their own facilities inside Orange County right now, and after listening, I'm not sure they're going to hit it in time for this to come up, let alone inviting other cities in to the process. So we don't have a lot of options, and that's one of the things that we're kind of struggling with. And I will say, I'm not sure how many of us have gone out and seen it, but our current waste hauler, CR&R, does have a facility out in Paris, California, and it is one of the best in the world by my understanding. But part of the problem is there's not a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of cities understanding that right now. And so if they fill up, we're going to be in trouble in a couple years. And so that's one of the things we're trying to struggle with too, is the timeline on this. And so it's hard. It's hard. And this is, and we say that about not a ton of things up here, but this one's hard. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about this, that we're involving all of you, because we don't know the answer at the moment.
Well, and it's behavior change for everyone. And what I have been out to CR&R's facility in Paris. I thought I was going to the other Paris, but it was, but it was a great experience anyway. But we are fortunate, and I know they're sitting here, we are fortunate that they have made the investment to create this Merv facility, a highly sophisticated, where everything that goes in gets repurposed and created into small bite-sized pieces of whatever, steel to green waste. But right now, they're really the only game in town because the county isn't really capable. So it's going to be an interesting situation that cities are going to be running into. Mr. Muldoon.
Yes, could I ask Mr. Snow to come forward? I have a couple of questions of our contractor.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and esteemed council members. I'm Jeff Snow with CR&R Environmental Services.
How are you? Good? You seem good.
Great.
Okay. How many cities do you...
How do I look?
You look great. You look great. Look, a little nervous, but good. How many cities do you have the agreement where you haul the trash for the residents, like you do with Newport Beach?
We have 57 exclusive residential franchise agreements throughout Southern California and Arizona. 16 cities in Orange County, 10 in Riverside County, 2 in San Bernardino County.
And so I imagine this is front of mind, this problem for your organization as well.
It is. This legislation, it was signed by Governor Brown September 30th of 2014. Many of us chose to ignore it, and now we're 5 months away from needing a solution. So many of our partner cities are assertively and aggressively engaged in formalizing partnerships with solutions to help them comply by January 1 of 2020.
Are you able to share with us some of those strategies, or they're not ready for prime time yet?
I am. 17 of those cities have already signed agreements with us. Our original, very first city was here in Orange County. It was the Costa Mesa Sanitation District. They actually committed off blueprints. Eric Garcetti in the city of Los Angeles was our second and remain our largest customer, and the city of Temecula was the third. In the Riverside County 15 corridor, Temecula is really a bellwether city, and what they do, everybody else wants to do. So our remaining 9 cities, 100% of those cities are now partnered with us. In the last month, Aliso Viejo and Laguna Niguel have both unanimously voted to partner. I can tell you our vote count of elected officials is 95-0. Once people really understand the limited capacity and the environmental superiority of our solution and the lowest cost long term, it really becomes a decision, certainly not being confrontational with Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill, because it is a difficult decision, but the decision becomes very easy. If I may, Councilmember Muldoon mentioned that in 2 years and 5 months, residential food waste recycling will become required. That will take a whole additional cart that will be yellow. So cities that aren't partnered with a solution that can take green and food in a single cart will have to add a yellow cart. So you're going to see your Anaheims and Huntington Beaches with 4 carts, 4 trucks going down each street, and those rate increases will have to be 25 to 33% to pay for that Teamster and that $400,000 trash truck. Our cities that have already adopted partnerships with our ROAR facilities understand that they get the benefit of not having to add that additional pass and having 2 different recycling solutions, one for residential green waste and another one for residential food waste. We are the only solution that can take them commingled and co-digest them in our facility. So yeah, we're a little bit more right now than composting, but in 2 years, those cities that can find composting capacity are going to have the additional cost of a whole nother cart, a whole nother truck pass, and the cost of processing straight food waste, which is done in partnerships with wastewater plants and haulers. Waste Management owns the largest facility in the city of Orange. So I stand here with great confidence that our solution in the long term will be absolutely the lowest cost, the most environmental, the most convenient, and the safest, because I'll have the least number of trucks going down streets in our cities.
And we appreciate that. What is the environmentally superior technology you referenced?
We use high solids anaerobic digestion. We call our facility the world's largest cow. A cow eats hay and it flatulates methane gas. AOC wants to put diapers on them. That's San Joaquin Valley's issue. We capture 100% of that gas and it becomes RNG, or renewable natural gas. Molecularly, it's exactly the same as natural gas that we frack for from fossil fuel. We are the only negative carbon fuel on the planet because we're capturing methane that would otherwise go into our air to breathe from the landfill, and we're putting it right into our trucks. It's like Back to the Future here today. If you remember the crazy-haired professor with the DeLorean putting a banana peel in his car, that's exactly what CR&R has perfected. Today we have 500 of our trash trucks running off of renewable natural gas that we're making from the very waste that those trucks pick up from our partner cities.
And you're doing that in Newport Beach. Your trucks are running on that natural gas.
Our trucks in Newport Beach are running on natural gas, not renewable natural gas.
Oh, okay. But
In July of 2018, we made the first and only interconnection with Sempra Energy, and we're putting our renewable natural gas into the pipeline so we could pipeline it here to where we fuel our trucks for Newport Beach and use that same RNG that we made here in Newport Beach.
So is there any point you think that the sale to Sempra or some other provider is going to offset the increased costs in collecting this trash?
In our economic model, we have federal RIN credits that were given from the EPA. We have state LCFS credits that were given from the state for having a low carbon fuel standard, and we are selling the gas to ourselves. We are using that gas in our Garden Grove facility for some of our partner cities that are already formally partnered with us at ROAR.
And as a contract city with CR&R, will we have preferential treatment if the demand grows to use your facility?
As our partner, Councilmember Muldoon, you'll always have preferential treatment, but we also ask you to be cognizant of the magnitude of the investment that our family-owned company has made in that facility. And we need to make sure that we're at 100% capacity. And we have many cities that we do not service offering a much higher per ton rate than what we've offered the city of Newport Beach to use our solution. We will not do that until you say yes or no. Once you say no, we'll respectfully ask that Yorba Linda or Huntington Beach or one of the other cities that has expressed written interest to us, that we give them that capacity. But we built this for our customers. We built this for you. We built it for Newport Beach, and we want to make it available to you, however long your decision process may take.
Thank you.
Let me, as long as you're standing, Mr. Snow, let me ask you a couple questions. You mentioned the other cities, Temecula, et cetera, Aliso Viejo have signed up with you. Are they already operating with this organic waste program?
They are, and they're already putting their residential food waste into it. So while everybody else's diversion is going backwards, theirs is going forward. San Clemente, Westminster, Midway City, Stanton, Costa Mesa, Aliso Viejo, Laguna Niguel, all of these cities are now recycling food waste in addition to residential food waste, in addition to green waste. One of the hardest components of SB 1383 that's not required till 2022, they're doing now, and it doesn't cost them anything extra, and it's making our environment better.
How long was the startup period for these cities once they signed a contract and got everybody, did they change their rates? How did they kind of get this all up and operating?
They did, Mayor Dixon, and the rate variance was really dependent upon how much green waste they produced. The lowest, I think, was $1.95 per home per month. The highest, $3.61 for the city of Orange with those very big yards. So it varies. We have a proposal that we can provide to the working group upon your request to give you exact numbers on what it would cost for Newport Beach. We know it's 13,000 tons per year, and we divide it the same way. The $1.75 that Trevor mentioned, keep in mind that's for zero diversion. That's treating it as trash, and it's still going to create methane in the atmosphere. And most of our cities, especially our coastal cities, have constituencies and have leaders that love this planet very much and that want to do the best for it. And we're going to be a little bit more than that, but we're also going to take care of your residential food waste, which is going to be a whole nother issue that some cities will be dealing with 2 years from now.
Okay, let me just understand the mechanics here. We talked in the presentation this afternoon about the franchise haulers. How many franchise haulers are doing what CR&R is doing? Do you know, just in terms of what the competition is doing?
CR&R is the only Southern California waste company with an anaerobic digestion solution. There is another anaerobic digester being built by a German company in Fontana. Waste Management and Republic Services have both signed feedstock agreements, but it does not handle green waste. The green waste is the largest fraction. This particular digester will handle biosolids, which is what's flushed down toilets, and it will handle food waste. But our high solid anaerobic digester, ROAR, using Eisenman technology, is one of a kind in the United States of America. It's the largest and most sophisticated in the world, and we hope to expand it as our economics allow us to do that. But right now we have Phase 1 and Phase 2 completely built and waiting for our own cities to commit or not to commit. So again, we'll be patient, but this is in 5 months, something has to change.
So that was going to be it. So that's the 5 months is really where, let me just go back to staff. So we are moving down the track of having a revised ordinance that will codify all what we're talking about. When was your timing that we would go forward and put out RFPs or discuss with haulers about what we need to do?
That's incumbent upon, you know, the decision we make as to how we're going to process our material and which option we're going to utilize. So once we've made that decision, then we would be able to you know, narrow down what our timeline would be in our implementation phase.
So you think we'll have that by September when we come before, when you come at the proposed ordinance? It doesn't sound like we're there yet, right?
No, not close.
And if I may mention, Mayor, your city council back in 2014, Mr. Harp, your city attorney, and CRNR, very visionary in contemplating this legislation. It was included in your franchise agreement. So there's an administrative option to trigger this that really doesn't even require a vote from council. So that was contemplated. It is in your current franchise agreement, and it can be done administratively to either compost, or if we can find a place to compost, or to anaerobically digest. And the amount that was included in the franchise agreement is adequate to cover our proposal.
Oh, Mr. Muldoon?
I just want to say I like to try to do this before we lose the opportunity, especially if it's already, if we had the wisdom and forethought, I guess, which is shocking to me. If we had that forethought in 2014.
I don't think it was us. It was the prior council, I think.
No, we were. No,
It was 14.
I thought we voted on. I think we voted on that. I remember.
Was that us?
Yeah. But
Good.
staying on your record, Diane. But it'd be great if we could hit that deadline. I don't know what it takes from us, but if it's administrative, or if you need to bring it for the council for a vote of confidence. I did not know a lot of what I've just learned today, but I'm very impressed. And
we would love to provide more tours at our facility at the Paris without Eiffel Towers to any of the council members, especially Council Member Brenner, who's on the working group. But we can also do a study session, a brief one, to bring it to you and help you understand
I will endorse
it a
the
little bit more.
experience. It's the future. And I commend CRNR for the investment. As you say, a family-owned company. It's not a publicly traded company that has invested in this huge $6 or $10 million capital investment. Well, $60 million, I believe it is.
Yes.
$60 million.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I knew I remembered that. Anyway, so good point. If you want to continue that thought. Mayor Pro Tem?
So I've taken a look at the administrative option, and I think that we need to, I'm just going to say, I think we need to look at it. It's not quite as great, I think, on the administrative side, but I think that we need to, I do want to see a proposal come through the working group at the next meeting. That would be helpful, because I agree we need to push this one forward. And we've, to be fair, we've been talking about this quite a bit at the working group. It's tough because one of our things is trying to figure out what are the other options. And so to Councilman, I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was Mayor or Councilman Muldoon's question to staff. The question was, when are we going to be ready to do this? And I think the answer was, well, we've got to figure out which path forward we're going to take. The issue is we've been working through this, and that's the issue. That's the one that's why I wanted to make sure we talked about this. There are not a lot of paths forward. That's the thing that's been driving me crazy while we've been working this through. And we tried really hard to ask the County of Orange, hey, what are you doing for yourself? And they said, well, we're building facilities. Okay, well, how much can you take? We're not sure we're gonna be able to take all of our own, and we're definitely not going to add on other people until we can figure that out. Okay. So then we start looking at, okay, what are the other options? And the other options are not great. And this is the thing. So when we're working this through, we have a really good option, and that's it. Yeah. And so that's the challenge, and that's why when we're talking about this, it's to Mr. Snow's comment about 5 months from now, I will just say from a green waste perspective, we've looked at our numbers. We would probably be fine for a little while, but we can't just say, okay, we're fine for a little while. This 2022 will come fast, and it would be awful if we don't make a decision soon that causes a council in 3 years to be looking at us saying, why didn't you act?
I mean, now,
Yeah, and so I do want to see this, and I do think, frankly, we gotta bring this to a head pretty soon.
Ms. Brenner.
The factor that was most impressive to me when we were talking about this was that this was our only option that allowed us to stick with 2 trash cans, right? We didn't have any other options, and that means fewer trash trucks in our community contributing to traffic and safety and that sort of thing. Yeah, and it is the best one for the environment. So I feel like the sooner we move forward and get people started on this, the better off we are. And if it's before we're actually required to do that, then that's even better, because that gives them time to get used to it. And in my house, well, in my family, the ones that are separating it so severely and are worried about combining, those aren't in my family. My concern is that this is going to make it easier for people who have not been vigilant about separating to just separate between wet and dry, basically. And I think that once we get our citizens used to that, they're going to really appreciate this.
Oh, did you want to say something, Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm sorry, yeah, just one last thing I forgot to mention, just so everybody understands, this is really expensive. It's really expensive. It's mandatory, so it doesn't matter, we have to spend it, but I will say it is really expensive. So when we get that proposal and it's coming up, just anticipate the sticker shock, because it's there. One thing real quick, I know that there is some kind of agency or law at the state level that talks about unfunded mandates and claims cities can make for unfunded mandates. I would love to see, I'd at least like a yeoman's effort on this one, because this is so expensive, and it is such an expensive mandate coming down from the state on this. And I get why they're doing it, but it is so expensive. So have I said it's expensive? I think, anyway, all right.
Well, all good comments. I will say, back to the visionary comment, I would like to see, I'm sure my colleagues would agree, Newport Beach wants to be on the forefront of not only doing the right thing, but doing the environmentally right thing within a cost structure that we and our residents can manage. And it is the solution is within our reach. So I would like to agree with my colleagues who have expressed, let's have a parallel path going forward, drafting the ordinance and the franchise agreements, and also the process that we would need to do to implement our existing franchise agreement for our existing hauler to start moving our waste in 2020 instead of 2022. Those 2 years are going to be here before we know it. Any other comments up here? Seeing none, I will now go out to the public. Any public comments, please come forward. Please come forward. Yeah.
Karen Corson, nice to meet you.
Wait, excuse me, ma'am, it's on this item.
No, it's not on agenda.
Okay, you could do that in the full session, or well, no, after we finish this discussion, we'll call for regular comments on public comments on non-agenda items. This is on the agenda. All right. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Carmen Rosso. As you look at how to implement this program, we have in the peninsula a lot of short-term rental, so that's going to be difficult to implement, to have the dry and the wet. Also on the beach, all the trash that you are in the beach, you won't be able to implement it. As you look at the green waste, many residential places, they may have their gardeners take the green waste with them. I don't know what's going to happen once this is implemented with that, that maybe the gardeners are going to push back and say, no, you keep your green trash, and that will increase the volume. So just those things to consider.
Very good. Yeah. Did you want to speak? Okay. Next speaker, please.
Mayor Dixon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. First of all, with regard to the working group that we've heard so much about, I just have to comment that I think it would have been cleaner when an issue like this comes up if it had been presented to the public at a council meeting, and it was the council that had appointed the working group rather than the staff creating a working group, kind of the staff privately telling council members to work on something that the public doesn't know they're working on. The result may be okay, but it's not exactly the public's business being done in public. So in the future, I would hope the staff would bring the issues to the public and the council in a public setting, and it would be the council who chooses who they want to work on the problem. Regarding the formation of the working group and the letter that we heard the city received, for the first time we heard about it today, it seemed, I heard, to have to do with AB 341, which, if I understood, it's the one requirement we're doing the best on so far, and it has nothing to do with green waste. It has to do with the basic recycling requirement. And I kind of got lost in the earlier slides as to what the 25 businesses that are not in compliance with that, what are they out of compliance about? Is it that all the trash from those businesses is going to the landfill? They're not recycling at all? They're not meeting the 50% requirement? They're not meeting the 75% requirement? Or what is it that they're out of compliance about? And does that 75% requirement not apply to the city as a whole? And how is the city doing on that, if that's still the requirement? And I kind of thought I'd heard that the 75% goal had been replaced with a requirement that cities get the per capita pounds per year that go to a landfill below a certain level. Is that now the current requirement for cities? And if so, how are we doing on that as a city? Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to attempt to answer, how is the city doing? And
So just to clarify a little further, I'll go back on a few slides here really quick. So we were talking earlier about AB 341, mandatory recycling. So current compliance rate is around 90%. Approximately 25 businesses and multifamily complexes in the city do not have recycling programs. So that means they're not participating in the program. So
how many are? So 90%, so that's 100 and...
We could get those numbers for you momentarily.
And just to clarify also on AB 341, I'll go back a couple slides here. So if you look at AB 341 on this table here, mandatory commercial recycling state goal of 75% diversion by 2020. So we're meeting the goal of that, but our goal is to do our best. So we have identified 25 businesses who do not meet that. So our goal is to get them into compliance as well and improve our numbers even further.
So we can get to 100%. Is that what you're suggesting?
But hopefully, yes. But we are meeting our goal. We are in compliance with that, but there are businesses who are not, so we want to work with them.
Yeah.
The state's expectation is 100% compliance, so that 90% should be 100, and that's one of the reasons the city's considering this ordinance, and that CalRecycle is more or less telling us that we need one. And there's 250 total covered businesses in the city that are doing the right thing in recycling. So
That's good. That's very good. We appreciate that. Any other public comments? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Hoyen Yev. First, I want to say thank you for doing this. And this is a lot of work mixed with frustrations dealing with people. It's not easy. So I have some loose ideas. The goal is to reduce costs and trash. So I just have some general ideas. I think this also could go hand in hand with the trash provisions on the ocean side. Back to Speak Up Newport, Dave gave a good talk with Dean. So one of the things they said is papers can go into the new bin. So that will help reducing trash a lot. So I think the side of reducing confusion people have is that, you know where I'm going with this. This is not a paper plate. This is plastic coated. So this is not compostable. This is not recyclable. So if we only allow compostable, then that's less confusion. People can just, after dinner, after party, you just throw the whole thing into the new bin. On the other hand, to reduce trash, I mentioned a few times about serve on request. We already have the plastic straws serve on request, so there's other serve on requests we can do. So that will be reducing trash. Outreach, that is a lot of work we need to do. So one thing I heard from Malibu is that in parallel to their plastic ban, their outreach part of it was to give samples out, compostable samples. They say seeing is believing. I mean, I keep learning this lesson, seeing is believing. So we could also give compost, whatever we want to promote, the direction we're going to, so we can give samples to restaurants. And also at our events, we have lots of events here. Coming up, the Green Expo. Shane and John, our stormwater staff, always are at the table, so they could demonstrate some of this stuff we want people to go to. So that's one part of the education. Last, I want to say the magic of the plastic straw deal, that succeeded because the education hit the heart. Everybody saw the video of a turtle has a plastic straw in the nose, so you go, ooh. So that enabled some cities to ban plastic straws, and in the end, that enabled the state to do it. So I think there's a great importance on public education on the heart. It's not easy, but thank you for what you do.
All right, any other comments on this item? Seeing none. Mr. Muldoon, did you want to say something? Okay. All right, any other comments up here? Seeing none, so keep doing the good work, staff, and we'll look forward to hearing more. Oh, Ms. Brenner, did you?
Can I say one quick thing? I have to tell you that when I was in Texas, I saw a cartoon, and it pictured California, and it said, right to carry in California, and it showed a plastic straw in someone's belt.
Oh, how funny. As long as we're just making wrap-up comments, I will say in the city of New York, there are at least 5 bins, of 5 different colored bins. And if you don't comply, if a resident, and for residents, if you pollute a bin improperly, you get fined. So it's really quite stringent in New York City. Well, thank you, staff. Excellent. You've been preparing this work for many months. We appreciate your determination to keep moving this forward and keep us informed, and thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in September. All right. Now, this is a time for public comments on agenda and non-agenda